After we bury him, we'll need to move quickly, my eldest son whispered at my husband's funeral. Title first, the house, then the accounts. I stood at the back of the chapel, clutching black gloves like they were rails on a collapsing bridge. My own flesh and blood were dividing his estate as if I were already in the grave beside him. Mom's not going to fight, the younger one muttered. She never managed anything. They say grief tests the living, but what happens when the children you raised turn grief into a weapon against you? My husband's casket caught the light at the front of the church. Polished wood, dignity, love made visible. Robert always looked good in dark oak. He used to joke that someday I'd bury him in a library. He wanted to be surrounded by silence and something that had learned to keep a secret. I took one step forward, then another. I wanted to lay a hand on the casket and whisper what we never finished saying during those last hospital nights. I forgive you for leaving first. I hope you forgive me for every time I was afraid. But David pivoted, blocking the aisle like a gate that had forgotten it was ever meant to open for me. His expression was cut from stone, my jawline, his father's eyes, and the chilly certainty of someone who had already told a story about you and decided you would not get to change it. This meeting is only for heirs, he said, the words clean and brutal. I stared at him. The boy I had held through night terrors and broken arms, the teenager who once hid in my kitchen because a teacher said he'd never amount to anything, and he believed it for a terrible minute. Heirs. He said it like I wasn't Robert's wife of 45 years. Like vows evaporate if you've washed too many dishes. I am his wife, I said, the sentence small but sturdy. Amber, David's wife, slid to his side, perfume soft and smiling like an apology that never reached the mouth. Margaret, you've been through so much. Let the younger generation handle logistics. Women your age shouldn't have to worry about assets. We'll take care of you. We'll take care of you. I have never heard a threat arrive in a prettier dress. Nicole, married to Mark, drawled from behind them. There's a lovely community in Greenbrook, a cozy apartment near the assisted living center. They have cute little art classes. Isn't that right, Mark? He didn't meet my eyes. Let's just get through today. A hush fell. The murmurs shifted. People pretended not to look, which is how people often look the hardest. The lawyer, Mr. Halpern, tugged his tie and gestured toward the side room for the will reading. The door swung and an usher touched my elbow like a gentler kind of warning. Please, I said, hearing the rasp of grief in my own voice. I just want to hear my husband's wishes. David didn't step aside. There's nothing left for you to hear. If you were me, what would you have done in that moment? Would you shout and make the lilies tremble? Would you fold and let the story end before it has the chance to tell the truth? Or would you look at your child and decide, for the first time in a long time, to let him underestimate you? Because here is what my sons had forgotten. I may look like a woman who sets the table and keeps the calendar, but I've also learned how to keep one last key in a pocket no one thinks to check. Robert taught me that. The recessional hymn began too soon. I stood among faces I'd fed, neighbors I'd loaned sugar to, distant cousins who would go home and say, "Poor Margaret, such a shame." I said goodbye to the man I loved by watching other people say it for me. When the casket moved, I felt the air thin, as if the whole room had decided I needed a little less oxygen than the rest of them. I did not faint. I did not cry. I watched. I listened. And I kept my hand curled around the small, thick envelope hidden inside my purse, the one Robert told me to find. The day after he died, I had opened his old roll-top desk to clear the papers no one else wanted to touch. Beneath ledgers and warranties and a faded photograph of our first rented house was a manila envelope sealed in wax. In Robert's careful hand, to my wife, Margaret. For the day they forget who you are. I hadn't opened it then. Not yet. I slipped it into my purse like a talisman and told myself I would know when to break the seal, at the church. With my sons whispering deeds and titles like new prayers, I knew the day had arrived. The service ended. People threaded toward the lawn, toward the long green mouth, waiting to accept my husband back into the patient dirt. I trailed behind the procession, the wind moving the willow branches like 1,000 silent hands waving goodbye. At the graveside, the priest spoke of dust and mercy and the kindness of a man who had remembered everyone's birthdays. I remembered more. I remembered a contractor who cheated us and Robert saying, "Let it go, Maggie. We'll outlast him." I remembered the day our mortgage rate climbed and he spent 2 nights rewriting our budget, then carried me out to the porch at dawn and said, "Some things are heavy. Our love isn't one of them." I remembered laughter. I remembered stubbornness. I remembered that Robert had never once left me alone in a fight. So why was I standing there feeling like a solitary flag in a wind that would rather see me torn? After the burial, the family clustered back inside the chapel's side room like a pack of wolves that had learned good manners. Mr. Halpern opened a leather folder. I stood by the door. I have always known how to be quiet in rooms that were not built for me, until the moment they were. I, Robert Harlan Whitaker, the lawyer read, leave the primary residence, the investment accounts, and the remaining business interests to my sons, David and Mark, in equal measure. Amber inhaled like she'd been practicing a gasp in the mirror. Nicole's phone tilted slyly. A red recording dot glowed like a smirk that had learned electricity. "And to my wife, Margaret," the lawyer continued, and then he stopped. He skimmed the page, blinked, frowned. "It appears there is no provision listed here." I felt the room tilt. Not because I believed it, because I recognized a hand I knew too well. Robert had loved our boys fervently. He had also understood that a clean page could hide a paragraph written somewhere else. "Mom," David said, threading an arm around my shoulders as if we were acting in a play about tenderness. "We'll make sure you're comfortable. We can give you a monthly stipend until we sell the house." My name was gone, erased from ink and from their faces. It was, I realized, not a mistake for them. This was a design. I looked at the envelope in my purse. It pulsed against my palm like a heartbeat remembered. I left the room without a word. Let them call me weak. Let them call me old. I have been called worse by nights that were longer than this. At home, the house smelled like lemon oil and loss. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands didn't shake as I broke the wax. Inside, a letter in Robert's looping hand and a small blue USB drive with a piece of masking tape across it. On the tape, 3 words, "For your proof." I unfolded the letter. "My Maggie," it began. "If you are reading this, I am gone from the room, but never from the life. I know our boys. I know how love turns to fear when money enters the conversation. I drafted 2 wills. One is public, to keep the wolves asleep. It will tell a tidy story our sons think they want to hear. The other is private, recorded in my voice. It is the truth. Use it only if they make you invisible. The lawyer who can authenticate it is Mr. Lang at Benton and Cole. He knows how to walk into a room full of men who think they own the floor and pull the rug without spilling a glass of water. I have left everything to you, as we agreed when we were young and foolish enough to think we might die at the same time. After you decide what you need, what you want, and what you wish to bless others with, the boys will receive $500 a month. Let them come to you for it. Make them look you in the eye so they remember the cost of dignity. If they treat you with respect, you may treat them with mercy. If they do not, you have my blessing to become the storm they taught you to fear. I trust you, Maggie. I always have. R. I stared at the drive in my palm until the room stilled. I plugged it into Robert's old laptop. A window popped open. a single audio file, to my wife and to the truth, MP3. When I pressed play, his voice filled the room, warm, rough around the edges, so alive I wanted to argue with it about the thermostat. "If you're listening," he said, "it means the public version has been read. The private will names my wife, Margaret, as the primary beneficiary of all real property, accounts, and business interests. Mr. Lang has notarized instructions and custody of the sealed document. If my sons dispute this, shame on me for raising boys who forgot what love does when it grows up. I hope they remember. If you're watching this with me now, from a screen rather than a pew, tell me, would you keep quiet a little longer? Let their arrogance ripen until it is heavy enough to pick? Or would you march back into that chapel and press play so loud the lilies fall off their stems?" Before I answer, let me say this. Before we dive into today's drama, be sure to subscribe to Twist Story and turn on the notification bell. Here, you'll always find stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Where are you watching? Leave a comment below. Maybe the next story resonates with your own experience. I closed the laptop. I wiped my face. I stood, the way you stand when you remember your spine belongs to you. Then I slipped the letter back into the envelope, placed the USB in a small velvet pouch, and walked downstairs to brew tea I did not intend to drink. The night pressed its ear to the window. The house creaked like it remembered my children as babies. I was not a baby. I was a woman with a voice in a pouch and a law firm's name in my pocket. In the morning, I would make a call. But first, I would let them hang themselves with the rope they had so cheerfully braided. I set the 2 place settings at the table, one for Robert, one for me, then cleared his spoon and kept mine. The wolves were still asleep. I would wake them gently. Grief rewrites the house. It moves chairs you thought were steady and teaches doors to stick. The morning after the will reading, I found my kitchen rearranged. My blue mixing bowls exiled to the top shelf, my favorite mug tucked behind vitamins I never bought. I didn't need a detective to know who had been busy. Amber liked to refresh spaces. Nicole liked to optimize flow. Neither of them liked to ask. I stood a while with my hands on the counter, letting the quiet settle. The lemons in the fruit bowl were a little too shiny. Someone had polished them for appearances. That's how it always begins, with polish instead of help. "My coffee machine is broken," Amber called, sweeping into the kitchen in silk and certainty. "We'll just use yours for a few days. And the freezer? We need space for meal prep. I tossed a few of your old items." "My items," I said, "in my freezer." She smiled like a magazine cover. "You're adorable when you get territorial. Margaret, no one is trying to hurt you. We're modernizing. It's what families do when the patriarch passes. Consolidate, streamline, plan." Nicole wandered in, cardigan slipping off one shoulder the way girls wear carelessness like jewelry. "Also, Mom, the neighbors asked about estate plans at the vigil last night. And I realized, you might not know, David and Mark are meeting a realtor this afternoon to discuss the house." "My house," I said, because sometimes the only fight you can manage is repeating the truth until it stops sounding like defiance. "Don't be dramatic," Nicole whispered, as if drama were a disease she could catch. She opened the pantry and frowned at the labels I had handwritten years ago for the grandkids. "Do we really need snack basket for little hands anymore? The children prefer granola bars in bulk. You'll adjust. You always do." If you've ever stood in your own kitchen and felt like a guest, you are not alone. If someone has smiled at you while rearranging your life and called it love, come sit beside me. We will compare notes and draw a better map. When the front door clicked, David and Mark were already half in their coats, keys jingling with the bright impatience of men late to their own decisions. David kissed Amber's temple without looking. Mark texted while walking, the new way of saying, "I'm listening to something far more important than you." "Mom," David said, We'll be back by 3. Try to rest. Mr. Halpern wants to finalize paperwork this week. My hands reached for the dish towel because if they didn't hold something, they might reach for a throat. Paperwork for what? The title transfer, Margaret. Amber's tone was kinder than the content. You'll be comfortable. A small monthly stipend and the Greenbrook plan. It's ideal for women your age. Yoga, water aerobics, low-maintenance living. Low maintenance? I murmured. I must have missed the day we voted to trade mothers for amenities. They left. The house sighed. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and took the velvet pouch from the drawer. The USB inside felt heavier than its shape, the way truth always does. I set it on the nightstand and watched dust motes move like tiny planets through a sunbeam. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Benton and Cole. Mr. Lang's office, a calm voice answered. This is Margaret Whittaker. My husband, Robert, left instructions with Mr. Lang. There was a pause that sounded like a nod. Yes, Mrs. Whittaker. Mr. Lang asked us to expect your call. Do you have the recording? I do. Can you be here at 1 o'clock? Yes, I said, because the time for waiting had passed. The second call was to myself, the quiet conversation a woman has when she closes the door and tells her reflection the truth. You've been gentle long enough. Now be precise. At Benton and Cole, the reception area smelled like paper, leather, and the kind of confidence that isn't sold in stores. Mr. Lang had gray hair that made him look like an oak in winter, bare branches, deep roots. He ushered me into a glass-walled conference room and waited, the way only old-fashioned professionals and good friends know how to wait. I placed the USB on the table as if I were laying down a card in a game I finally understood. He listened to Robert's voice with the solemn attention of a judge and the softness of a son. When it ended, he folded his hands. Your husband was thorough. The audio aligns with the sealed private will I've held in escrow. He anticipated complications. Complications, I said, and couldn't help the small laugh. We call them David and Mark. Mr. Lang's mouth twitched. The public will was filed as a protective measure. He trusted you to reveal the private will if necessary. I'll petition the probate court to admit the private instrument into evidence. The chain of custody is clean. The witnesses are in my file. If your sons dispute, the forensic audio expert will testify. It's strong. How long? Quickly, he said. Your situation is urgent. Mr. Lang, I said, leaning in. There's one more thing in Robert's letter. $500 a month to each son, distributed by me in person. He didn't flinch. An elegant clause, legal and educational. I want them to learn where money comes from, I said, and where respect returns. We'll make it clear. He slid a printed timeline across the table. Steps, dates, signatures, the choreography of reclaiming a name. I recommend you keep your composure while we file. Let them make the first public mistake. It will help your case and your soul. My soul can wait, I said. My spine is ready now. He rose. Mrs. Whittaker, I've represented many estates. Few men anticipated their families with this level of accuracy. Your husband loved you very much. Yes, I said. He did, in living and in leaving. When I reached the sidewalk, the winter sun had that raw, honest light that shows everything it touches. I stood there a moment, letting it name me. Widow, wife, woman with a plan. I returned home to find Amber and Nicole filming in the living room, ring light blazing, a neat grid of curated grief behind them. The mantle photos had been rearranged, so Robert faced the camera at a modest angle, the better to be mourned on social media. Hey, angels, Amber cooed into her phone. We're still healing, but we're also excited to share a big family transition. Sometimes, life gives you a chance to honor a legacy in practical ways. We'll be stewarding the Whittaker home as part of Dad's final wishes. Nicole leaned in, lip gloss catching the light. And we cannot wait to make it a space for the next generation. Minimalist, elegant, intentional. legacy, stewardship, home refresh. I stepped into the frame. The comments exploded. Hearts, prayers, a few raised eyebrows. Amber lowered the phone, smile glued on so tight it could crack if she breathed too hard. "Margaret," she hissed, low and urgent. "You can't just appear on camera." "I just did," I said, "in my house." Nicole ended the live feed, cheeks pink with the inconvenience of reality. "We discussed this. Public perception matters. If you make this messy, it will look bad for the family." "Here's a sentence I haven't heard yet," I said. "How are you doing, Margaret? Try it on your tongues. It won't hurt." "Don't make us the villains," Amber whispered. "You know we've only ever wanted what's best for everyone." Best for everyone. The phrase lined up like little soldiers to guard a looting. I walked to the mantel, straightened Robert's photo, and turned it so his eyes faced me. "Did the realtor like the house?" I asked. David and Mark had returned without my hearing them. David shed his coat with the flourish of a man who believes he wears the room like a suit. "He loved it," he said. "We're meeting a staging company tomorrow. The market's strong." "Staging," I said. "Will they be moving me too? Perhaps in the little cart with the throw pillows?" Mark's voice was tired, softer than his brother's but sharper than yesterday. "We're not doing this to hurt you. We're doing this because Dad trusted us to lead." "Did he?" I asked, studying their faces. "Or did he trust me to teach you, one last time, what leadership costs?" "A monthly stipend is generous," David snapped. "Most mothers would be grateful." "If you say grateful again," I said evenly, "I will show you the kind of gratitude that made this house. It's not pretty and it doesn't photograph well." Amber stepped between us. "Everyone breathe. Margaret, look. We're going to take you to Greenbrook tomorrow to tour the apartments. They have a lovely art studio and a shuttle to the mall. It's freedom, not exile." Freedom has a smell, and it is not bleach and bus schedules. I could feel the USB's presence upstairs like a lighthouse through fog. I could feel Robert's letter in my pocket like a hand at my back. "If you're watching with me, tell me." How would you have answered her? Would you nod to buy time? Or remind them that a woman who has wiped more noses and balanced more budgets than they've seen in their own lives is not a piece of furniture to be relocated for symmetry? I chose time. "I'll consider the tour," I said, and watched relief loosen their shoulders. "But I'll be busy for a few hours this afternoon." "Doing what?" David asked. "Finding a better map," I said. "One your father drew." He stared at me as if I'd switched languages. That's the thing about trained underestimation. It doesn't recognize fluency when it hears it. That evening, the house sat in its coat of twilight. The grandkids' drawing still taped to the fridge, the ring of Robert's coffee mug still faint on the end table. I made soup because soup is how my body remembers comfort. I set 4 bowls. I sat alone. The doorbell rang. On the porch stood our neighbor, Mrs. Duffy, clutching a foil-covered casserole, the universal language of sympathy. She's 72, lives 2 houses down, and knows where every body is buried that isn't in a cemetery. "Come in," I said, and she did, sweeping me into an embrace that smelled like lavender and stubbornness. "I saw the live video," she murmured. "Sugar, if they refresh this house anymore, it'll disappear." I laughed before I could stop it. It broke into a sound that might have been a sob if I had allowed it more room. "I have a plan," I whispered. "I know," she said, eyes glinting. "I can hear it in your bones." She sat me down and patted my hand. "Just remember, dignity is a long game. If you need me to witness anything, papers, conversations, I will. I'm very good at remembering exactly what was said. I trained a husband with it." We ate soup. We chose silence where words would only bruise. When she left, I walked through each room and touched one object that belonged to me. It was a ritual, a claiming. In the study, I opened the bottom drawer and found the old file box labeled Robert, personal. Inside, 2 neat bundles, letters from years we couldn't afford flowers, and a leather-bound journal I had never seen. A ribbon marked a page. Robert's handwriting again. If my voice is ever doubted, look here. A list followed. Account numbers, the original deed, the trust document he'd created before the boys were born, naming me trustee with full discretion, not to punish, to protect. There was also a small sealed envelope addressed to Mr. Halpern, the lawyer who had read the public will. The note on the front in Robert's hand, for the day he must choose which oath he carries home at night. I slipped the journal into my bag and felt the story shift weight. Downstairs, the front door opened. Laughter, Amber's perfume, Nicole's giggle, David's voice too loud telling a story that made himself the hero. They moved like they owned the place, because they believed they soon would. "Mom," Mark called. "You up?" I stepped into the hall as they gathered, staging swatches fanned in Amber's hand like cheap tarot. David waved a paper, an appointment confirmation with the realtor for 9 a.m. tomorrow. "Sleep well," he said. "Big day." "Yes," I said, and smiled in a way that made Amber blink. Huge. I clicked off the hallway light. In the dark, the house exhaled. A different sound this time, almost a chuckle. Let them stage. Let them film. Let them underestimate. Morning was coming, and with it, a new script. If you were me, would you bring the recording to the chapel in front of the family, or walk it into court and let the gavel teach the lesson? Tell me in the comments, because tomorrow someone is going to hear Robert's voice. Morning arrived with the brittle clarity of winter, sunlight so sharp it seemed to etch the world in truth. I dressed carefully, not for beauty, but for armor. A navy wool coat Robert once said made me look like I could command a boardroom. I tucked the velvet pouch with the USB into my handbag and slipped Robert's journal under my arm. Today, I was not a mother begging for scraps. I was a woman carrying proof. At 9 o'clock, the realtor arrived, briefcase bulging with glossy brochures. Amber and Nicole were already in the foyer, chirping about modern color palettes and open concepts. David hovered like a foreman. Mark leaned against the banister, silent but complicit. "Mrs. Whitaker," the realtor said politely, "I'll just need your signature as well to list the property." "She's not an owner," David interrupted. "It's just a formality. Don't worry." I smiled, the kind of smile that holds secrets in its teeth. "Why don't we sit in the dining room?" I suggested. "There are a few things I'd like clarified." The realtor blinked. The dining room was already half-staged. Robert's oak table stripped of its runner, silver candlesticks replaced by minimalist vases Amber claimed were timeless. I sat at the head, the seat Robert always took, and motioned for the others to join. David frowned. "Mom, this isn't necessary." "Sit," I said, and for the first time in years, my tone brooked no argument. They sat. I placed the journal on the table, spine facing them. Amber tilted her head, eyes narrowing at the sight of something she hadn't pre-approved. "What's that?" "Robert's handwriting," I said softly. "He left notes, records, instructions." David snorted. "Notes don't override a will." "True," I said. Then I opened the journal to the ribbon-marked page and slid it across the table. But a notarized trust document does, and so does this. From my handbag, I drew out the USB and set it beside the journal like a knight beside a queen on a chessboard. The room stilled. Even the realtor shifted uneasily, sensing a script change. "What is that?" Nicole asked, voice too high. "A voice," I said. "Your father's." Mark leaned forward, tension pulling at his features. "Mom, don't—" "Don't what?" I asked, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Don't defend myself? Don't honor the man I loved? Don't remind you who carried this family on her back while you learned how to walk?" I turned to the realtor. "I will not be signing anything today, or ever, unless it is under the authority of the private will Robert entrusted to Mr. Lang of Benton and Cole. He has the notarized copy and the chain of custody. You'll be hearing from him." The realtor cleared his throat, fumbling for dignity. "Perhaps I should return later." "Perhaps you should," I said. He fled like a man who had stumbled into the wrong play. Amber's face flushed crimson. "You're bluffing. There's no private will. If there were, why wouldn't Robert have—" "Because he knew you," I cut in, my voice hardening. "He knew greed wears perfume and calls itself family. He knew arrogance hides behind hashtags. He knew our sons might forget the woman who gave them everything, so he left me a voice." I pressed the USB into the laptop I had brought down from the study. Robert's voice filled the room, warm and undeniable. "If you are listening to this, it means the public version has been read. The private will names my wife, Margaret, as the primary beneficiary." Amber's mouth opened, then closed. David's face drained of color. Mark bowed his head into his hands. Nicole muttered, "This can't be legal." "It is," I said. "Mr. Lang has the documents. The court will confirm it. And as for you, my sons, your father left a provision. $500 a month from me, in person." David's head jerked up. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am," I said, eyes steady. "If you want the money, you will come to me, look me in the eye, and remember what respect costs." Mark whispered, "Why would he do that?" "Because he hoped you might learn," I said, "and because he trusted me to teach you." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Robert's recorded voice fading into stillness. "I trust you, Maggie. I always have. If you had been there with me, sitting at that stripped oak table, would you have savored the look on their faces? Or would you, like me, feel grief braided with triumph? Because winning against your own children never feels like victory, only survival?" Amber recovered first, pushing back from the table, her heels clicking on hardwood like hammers. "We'll contest this," she snapped. "You can't just humiliate us like this." I rose slowly. "I haven't even begun." David slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the vases. "This is absurd. You're manipulating Dad's memory. We'll take you to court." "Good," I said. "That's exactly where Mr. Lang is filing the documents. I'll meet you there. Until then, this is my house. You are guests. And I am no longer in the mood for company." I gathered the journal and USB, slid them into my bag, and walked out. My heart thundered, but my stride was steady. Behind me, I heard Amber hiss, "Do something!" and David mutter curses that made the walls blush. I didn't look back. That afternoon, I sat with Mr. Lang again. He was already drafting the petition to admit the private will into probate. "They may contest," he said, "but the evidence is airtight. The recording, the journal, the notarized documents, it's a fortress." "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I want respect." "Sometimes," he said, "respect requires a fortress." He handed me copies for my file. "Prepare yourself. They will lash out before they crumble." He was right. The days that followed were a storm. David refused to speak to me directly, sending Amber as his messenger. She accused me of stealing her children's inheritance, as if I had plucked coins from their piggy banks. Nicole posted cryptic messages online. Some people show their true colors when money's involved. "You're disappointed." That earned her sympathy from people who had never washed her dishes. Mark avoided me altogether, slipping in late at night to collect clothes, leaving the hall smelling faintly of regret. But the worst moment came when David cornered me in the kitchen. His face was tight, his voice low. "You'll regret this, Mom. Families don't survive betrayal." "Families don't survive greed," I said. "That's the difference." For a heartbeat, I saw something flicker in his eyes, shame perhaps, or recognition. But then it vanished, replaced by anger. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell. I picked it up. It was a photo of Robert holding both boys on his shoulders, their smiles wide. their hands reaching for the sky. I traced their faces with my thumb. "You were happier before money taught you hunger," I whispered. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I carried myself differently. Neighbors noticed. Even the cashier at the grocery store tilted her head, as if wondering why a widow stood so straight. It wasn't pride, it was armor. Mrs. Duffy, my neighbor, visited again. "Word travels," she said, eyes sharp. "Your children are telling folks you tricked Robert into rewriting the will." "And do you believe that?" I asked. She snorted. "I've known you 40 years. You couldn't trick a cat into eating tuna if it didn't want to." "No, sugar. I believe Robert trusted you. Always did. The rest? Well, people will learn." I smiled. Weary but grateful. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," she said. "Win. That'll be thanks enough." The night before the hearing, I opened Robert's letter again. The words steadied me like a hand on my back. "If they treat you with respect, you may treat them with mercy. If they do not, you have my blessing to become the storm." I closed my eyes, hearing his voice not just on the USB, but in my bones. I whispered into the quiet, "Tomorrow, my love. Tomorrow they'll learn." The courthouse smelled of old wood and arguments. Amber wore pearls like weapons. Nicole clutched a designer handbag as if it contained a better future. David strode in like a general. Mark followed, pale and silent. Mr. Lang placed the journal, the USB, and the notarized private will before the judge. He spoke calmly, precisely, the way rivers carve canyons. When Robert's recorded voice filled the courtroom, every eye turned. Some widened, some softened. And when the clause about $500 a month was read aloud, gasps rippled through the benches. David flushed crimson. Amber's hand gripped his arm. Nicole's face contorted between fury and disbelief. Mark closed his eyes. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Whitaker, do you understand that this places you as trustee with full discretion?" "I do," I said. "And you accept that responsibility?" "I accept," I replied, "with gratitude and with sorrow." His gavel fell like thunder. So ordered. I walked out of the courthouse into sunlight that felt different, cleaner, sharper. My sons trailed behind, their footsteps jagged with frustration. People whispered, not unkindly. A young woman even smiled at me as if to say, "Well done." For the first time in weeks, I breathed without weight pressing my chest. The storm had begun, and for once it was mine to wield. If you were me, would you have felt triumphant as the gavel fell? Or would you, like me, feel the ache of a mother who never wanted to fight her children but had no choice? Tell me in the comments, because justice in families always tastes bittersweet. They thought the gavel would end me, but in truth, it only lit the stage. The court's ruling was a thunderclap, sudden, unavoidable, and impossible to deny. Yet arrogance is a stubborn root. My children clung to it as if it were salvation. 2 days after the hearing, Amber arrived uninvited, heels striking my hardwood floors like a declaration of war. She carried a glossy folder and a smile painted on with desperation. "Margaret, let's be rational," she began, sliding into the living room like she owned the furniture. "David and Mark are devastated. This stipend arrangement, it's humiliating. $500 a month? Really? We're talking about men who manage investments and futures. You can't expect them to..." "To what?" I asked quietly, setting down my tea. "To face the woman who raised them? To say thank you instead of demanding more?" Her smile cracked. "You're bitter. I understand. But think of your grandchildren. Don't you want them to live well? You could adjust the clause, release funds early. You'd be remembered as generous." I leaned forward. "Amber, I will be remembered as their mother. Whether they remember me with gratitude or shame is up to them. I am not rewriting my husband's final wish to soothe your pride." Her cheeks flushed. "People are talking. They say you're cruel, that you're flaunting power. Then let them talk, I said. I've been silent long enough. She stormed out, muttering that I would regret humiliating her family. But the truth was already loose in the air, and soon it would spread wider than her whispers could reach. The next week, I prepared to make a statement, not with words alone, but with action. Robert and I had always dreamed of giving back once the mortgage was paid, once the boys were secure. He never got the chance, but I did. I called Mr. Lang and arranged the paperwork. Then I asked Mrs. Duffy to join me. Because every revolution needs a witness. We met at Whitaker Jewelers, the downtown store Amber adored, her temple of gold and glitter. Word had spread about my unexpected windfall, and I knew she'd be there, browsing like a queen surveying her kingdom. And she was. Pearl earrings caught the light on her lobes, and her nails sparkled as she gestured at a diamond bracelet. Nicole hovered nearby, snapping photos for some online audience. David scrolled through his phone, pretending indifference but staying close, tethered to appearances. When I entered, the shop hushed. Heads turned. Whispers fluttered. Amber's smile froze, halfway between victory and dread. "Well, well," she said loudly, enough for others to hear. "If it isn't Margaret, enjoying her triumph, shopping for something flashy, I suppose you want everyone to see you spend Robert's money." I let the silence stretch, the kind that sharpens edges. Then I approached the counter, pulled out the folder Mr. Lang had given me, and laid it flat. "I'm here to sign a transfer," I said clearly, so every ear in the store caught it. $1 million donated to the Women's Legal Aid Foundation, in Robert's name and mine. A gasp rippled. The clerk nearly dropped his pen. Even the young assistant with neon hair paused mid-polish to stare. Amber's face went crimson. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked, flipping the folder so she could see the notarized pages. "This money won't buy diamonds, Amber. It will buy freedom for women who've been silenced, displaced, or disrespected by their families. Women like me. Women stronger than me. Women who will not be erased." A young woman in the corner lifted her phone, live stream already running. "Are you seeing this?" she whispered to her viewers. "This is real. This is happening right now." David sputtered. "You can't just throw money away." "It's not throwing," I said. "It's planting. Seeds of dignity, roots of justice. My money, my choice. Your father's legacy, honored, not hoarded." Amber lunged closer, her voice shrill. "You're humiliating us in public." I turned slowly, letting my eyes sweep across the crowd that had gathered. Customers, clerks, strangers with phones lifted high. "No," I said softly. "You humiliated yourselves when you erased me from your father's will, when you called me useless, when you plotted to sell the roof over my head before the ground on his grave had settled. This," I gestured to the documents, "is not humiliation. This is justice." The live stream comments popped on the young woman's screen. "Go, Margaret! Respect to this queen!" Finally, someone stands up. David's composure shattered. "Mom, please," he hissed. "Stop this madness before it destroys us." I looked at him, the boy who once clutched my hand crossing streets, the man who now clutched his pride like a drowning man grasps water. For a heartbeat, sorrow swelled. But then I remembered Robert's words. "If they do not respect you, become the storm." "This villa," I said, my voice ringing with clarity, "this inheritance, this family name, they are mine, and you are trespassing." The store froze. David's mouth opened, but no sound came. Amber's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape that wasn't there. Nicole lowered her phone, suddenly aware the comments scrolling past her own live stream were not sympathetic but scathing. Mark, pale and trembling, whispered, "God, what have we done?" Mrs. Duffy placed a steadying hand on my arm. "Let them hear it, Margaret. Every word." So I did. I told the truth about the two wills, about Robert's foresight, about their insults and my silence, and the day silence ended. I spoke not with rage, but with a clarity honed by years of being ignored. The young woman's live stream grew. Strangers tuning in, watching a family unravel under the weight of its own greed. Some gasped, some clapped, some cried. And through it all, I stood, tall in my navy coat, not bitter, not broken, just done. Finally, David crumpled to his knees, voice cracking. "Mom, please, we were wrong. Just don't destroy us." I looked down at him, remembering scraped knees I once kissed better, lies I once forgave, promises I once believed. And then I stepped back. "I don't need to destroy you, David," I said. "You've done that yourself. My task is to rebuild me." I turned, signed the donation papers with a flourish, and handed them to the clerk. The crowd erupted in applause. Some filmed, some wiped tears. The live stream counter hit thousands. Amber collapsed into a chair, pale as porcelain. Nicole muttered excuses. Mark wept silently. David remained on his knees, stunned into stillness. I walked out into the afternoon sun, the cold air filling my lungs like liberation. The world outside the store felt wider, brighter, as if Robert himself had cleared the clouds. Beside me, Mrs. Duffy grinned. "Cold revenge," she whispered. "The best kind." I smiled. "Not revenge," I said. "Correction." If you had been there, watching your children collapse under the weight of truth, what would you have felt? Triumph? Sorrow? Relief? Tell me. Because in that moment I felt all three, braided together like strands of survival. The video went viral overnight. By morning, it had millions of views. Headlines spun. Widow outsmarts greedy children with secret will. Family drama in a jewelry store goes public. Talk shows debated it. Commenters chose sides, though most stood with me. And then came the consequences. David resigned from his firm under public pressure. Amber's influencer partnerships evaporated. Nicole's social posts were flooded with ridicule. Mark, the quiet one, called me at dawn one day, voice trembling, asking if we could meet. But I wasn't ready. Not yet, because I had one more act to play. The following week, I called a contractor and signed papers to renovate the house, not to stage it for sale, but to transform it. Robert's dream, my vision. Whitaker House, the sign would say. A safe haven for women left behind. It would be a shelter for women like me, widows discarded by families, mothers erased by children, wives betrayed by promises. A place where silence ended and dignity began. When the contractors asked about funding, I smiled. "I have enough," I said. "More than enough. And what better legacy than turning greed into grace?" The day the contractors arrived, I stood on the porch and watched them unload beams and paint cans, the morning light striking the Whitaker House sign I had commissioned. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. Inside, rooms once filled with whispered insults now rang with hammers and the laughter of workers who believed in the project. The dining room, where my sons had smirked at a staged future, would become a communal kitchen, warm with casseroles and conversation. The upstairs bedrooms, stripped of greed, would hold bunk beds and quilts for women who needed rest. Robert's study, sacred and steady, would remain untouched, a reminder of the man who trusted me with the storm. Mrs. Duffy arrived with a basket of muffins, surveying the bustle with satisfaction. "Well, Margaret," she said, hands on hips, "looks like you've turned a funeral into a resurrection." I smiled. It's what Robert wanted, what I want. No more silence. She patted my hand. And no more letting people take your place at your own table. Of course, not everyone approved. Word reached me quickly. David and Amber furious about the shelter, claiming I was squandering family wealth. Nicole tried to spin a new narrative online, calling me a bitter woman obsessed with revenge. But the public had already chosen their side. Comments flooded every post. "She's a hero. Respect to Margaret." Finally, someone standing up for older women. Even Mark came to see me one evening, his shoulders hunched, his voice quiet. "Mom, I don't know how to fix what we've done," he said. "But I'm sorry, I let them lead me. I should have remembered you better." I studied him. The boy who once hid behind me during thunderstorms, the man who had forgotten my sacrifices when greed called louder. His apology cracked something open, but not enough to erase the scar. "Respect isn't given by blood, Mark," I told him gently. "It's earned through love and kindness. If you want to repair this, start there. Start with humility." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "Can I volunteer here? At Whitaker House?" "Not yet," I said firmly. "This space must be free of manipulation. Earn trust elsewhere. Then we'll see." He accepted it, because truth has no soft edges. And though my heart ached, I knew boundaries were part of healing. The official launch of Whitaker House drew a crowd. Neighbors, community leaders, even strangers who had followed my story online. Reporters snapped photos as I cut the ribbon, my navy coat replaced by a simple sweater. Because this moment was not about armor, but about opening. Inside, I gave a short speech. For too long, too many women have been silenced in their own families, told they are useless, disposable, unworthy of respect. This house will tell them otherwise. Here, every voice matters. Here, dignity is the only inheritance. Applause thundered. Some cried, and I felt Robert beside me, proud and steady. That night, the first residents arrived. 2 widows, 1 divorced mother, and a grandmother cast out by her own children. They carried bags of clothes and stories heavy enough to bend spines. I welcomed each with tea and warmth, promising them what I had promised myself: you are not invisible here. The viral video of my confrontation at the jewelry store continued to ripple through the world. Employers questioned my sons. Banks reviewed accounts. Investigations opened into loans they had taken under Robert's name. Choices have consequences, and greed always sends the bill. David called once, his voice frantic. "Mom, please, we're ruined. Help us." I listened to the boy I had once tucked into bed, the man who had erased me at a funeral, and then I spoke with the calm that comes from clarity. "You wanted me gone, David. You erased my name. But names are stronger than ink. They live in truth, in action, in memory. You must face the consequences of forgetting that." He cursed, then begged, then hung up. I placed the phone down gently. No anger left in me. Only distance. Only peace. One quiet evening, as the house settled into sleep and the women upstairs whispered their thanks, I sat in Robert's study with his journal. I opened to a blank page and began to write. Not about grief, not about betrayal, but about the lessons carved from both. "Dear Robert," I wrote, "they tried to bury me in silence, but you gave me a voice. They tried to strip me of home, but you gave me the keys. They tried to erase me, but you gave me legacy. Whitaker House is ours, and though I lost my sons to greed, I found daughters in every woman who will walk these halls. Thank you for trusting me with the storm. I turned it into shelter. When I finished, I closed the book and placed it back in the drawer. My hands were steady. My heart, though scarred, was whole. If you were me, would you have forgiven your children after such betrayal? Or would you, like me, hold boundaries firm, knowing forgiveness without change is just another form of silence? Tell me, because each of us has known a moment where family asked too much and gave too little. The next Sunday, I stood in church, not at the back, not silent, but tall in the front pew. The lilies no longer smelled too sweet. The hymns no longer felt too loud. I sang, voice steady, because grief had given way to strength. Neighbors whispered not poor Margaret, but proud Margaret, and I carried those words home like a blessing. At Whitaker House, children's laughter spilled from the new playroom, and women brewed coffee in the communal kitchen. The air buzzed with life, not entitlement. For the first time in years, my house was full, and I was not lonely. One night, sitting by the window with Mrs. Duffy, I reflected aloud. I lost the people who called me mother, but I gained a family that calls me by my name, with respect. She squeezed my hand. And that, Margaret, is the greatest inheritance of all. I nodded. Justice hadn't erased the pain, but it had carved space for healing. And in that space, dignity grew. So let this story end with the truth I carry in my bones. Blood alone does not bind us. Respect does. Love does. Kindness does. I may have lost sons to greed, but I gained sisters in resilience. And I learned that silence is not noble when it erases you. It is noble when it chooses the right moment to roar. Robert's voice gave me courage. My own voice gave me freedom, and Whitaker House stands as proof. Betrayal may wound, but legacy can heal. If you've ever been silenced in your own family, know this: you are not alone. Here, in this community, every story is a reminder that dignity can be reclaimed, that no one deserves to be erased. Share your story below, because your voice matters too. And don't forget, subscribe to Twist Story for more tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Here, justice always finds its way home.